Hey, Birkett here. Carlos Monarrez coming in from off camera after another Lions lost their third straight 42-30 to the Minnesota Vikings at Ford Field. And as Carlos joins me coming around this corner here, it's, you know what, we talked about this at some point in the spring, Carlos, or maybe the early part of training camp. What if the Lions defense is not all it's cracked up to be? I think you were the first one that sort of asked that question. And look, through 6 games, it's come true. The Lions defense has been the biggest disappointment. You put up 30 points against the Minnesota Vikings at home, you expect to win that game. But they couldn't stop Kirk Cousins today. They couldn't stop Dalvin Cook. The play action, passing game just really exploded. 500 yards of offense for the Vikings. What is wrong with this Lions defense?
Well, there's a lot of questions about that. We're not really sure. I don't know if they're sure what the problem is. Damon Harrison just not been the same. He just had not been the same, overwhelming presence he was in the middle that he was last year. I don't think Trey Flowers has made much of an impact as much as they'd hoped it would help around the defense. They're not getting to the quarterback. They're not pressuring them enough. They're not, they're not blitzing too much. But today I think they tried more 4-man pressures and tried a blitz here and there from Jared Davis, but it just doesn't seem to be affecting the quarterbacks. It didn't help that Darius Slay got hurt. Snacks got hurt a little bit toward the end of the first half. So those little things, but that's kind of a normal, experience in NFL defenses. People are going to get hurt a little bit, but it's just a conundrum. I thought maybe they would serve at what they were last year, somewhere around top 10, maybe top 12, 13, but they just can't seem to be. They can't seem to stop much now.
Yeah, no, look, you mentioned the injuries, and it's a factor, but, the Vikings lost Adam Thielen for basically the whole game, too. So,
last week they lost 3 receivers.
With one receiver, Stephon Diggs, who went for 150 yards. It's just, you're right, the Lions, at least they say they don't have, we got to watch the tape. I don't know. I don't want to go back and look at last year. They're offering no solutions, no explanations, aside from we got to work harder, we got to get back to the fundamentals. Yeah, of course you do. But there's something that's going on. I wonder, look, this regime under Bob Quinn, they've done a very good job so far, at least before this year, I think you would say, of making the right free agent signings, not getting into bad contracts, making the drafting players that are going to be cornerstone type players, maybe not superstars, but guys that you would expect to get a second contract. And now all of a sudden, look, Trey Flowers, $90 million, and he hasn't had much production yet. I know he's not a big sack guy, but he hasn't had the production you'd expect from an $18 million a year defensive end so far. Damon Harrison, they extend him this offseason. You're right, he has not made the same type of splash plays that he did a year ago. And look, I don't know. I mean, if he does it against the Giants, or if this defense does it against the Giants, no one's going to be convinced. Or if they do it against Washington, no one's going to be convinced.
Right.
They've played Kansas City, in Green Bay, in Minnesota the last 3 weeks, and they struggled all 3 games. Granted, they were in the Green Bay game. Say what you want about the officiating. Granted, they were in that Chiefs game, but they couldn't come up with a big stop at the end. They couldn't come up with stops when they needed to. And today, they had no answer for the Vikings all the way around.
And you know what? I mean, that's you deserve credit for that, for saying that this is the Viking. If they do it against the Giants and the Raiders, people aren't going to say the same thing.
Well,
this was a chance at home. This is not a great offense from the Vikings, but it's a decent offense. They have enough weapons.
They've been good the last 3 weeks.
They've been good the last 3 weeks. Kirk Cousins has been okay. They have a run game, they have a pass game, they have tight ends, all that stuff. This would have been a nice statement for this defense to get. Now, and we can't forget, Mike Daniels has not played. Deshaun Hand has not played. All these different pieces that they don't have as well that may be affecting them more than possibly,
Absolutely.
But it's a shame when the offense is usually the problem is the offense. And when the offense is getting off to quick starts, to fast starts, they went up 7-0 and then 14-7, and then they've built a lead, And as you and I said, if someone told you before the game they're going to score 30 and lose, you wouldn't believe it. So they're wasting that opportunity, and it's weird because last year it was the strength, and it's something they have to correct. And to me, it's little things. It's the little things of that just looking at it without really studying it too much, but. Just a little missed tackle here and there, a little slow to the ball, closing, slow to close on certain plays, or he gets beat on, maybe I don't know if it's his hamstrings bothering him early in the game, but not sure of his speed and his ability to change direction. Little things that just are off. And in the NFL, that's the difference between winning a game and losing a game, is guys who just miss a little tackle or get beat here and there, or they run into each other, whatever it is, miscommunication. So, can you fix it?
Yeah, look, I think it can be fixed. I think there's still some good talent on the team, but you're right. You can pick out a dozen plays today, and you can point to a missed tackle, The Delvin Cook run, this first touchdown, there were some missed tackles. There was a miscommunication on the Kyle Rudolph touchdown pass. They're just, things went wrong and they snowballed against the Lions today. And I think there is still some good talent on this team, obviously, right? Darius Slay on defense. Darius Slay, Damon Harrison is still a good player. Like I said, the splash plays haven't been there. Trey Flowers, I think we've seen some good things out of Justin Coleman so far, though he did give up that long pass at the end of the game. But overall, there's just something is not clicking with this defense, and maybe it's the whole bend but don't break mentality where the Lions always seem to put themselves in close games because they give up so many yards. I don't know. To me, that's sort of a, you're sort of asking for it when that happens, right? Like you're saying, all right, we're going to be in a close game, and we know we're going to give up some points, and look, we just got to hold them when it counts. Well, hold them early. Don't give up some of these long drives. That 97-yard drive through, that was a killer early on when you have the offense pinned back on its own goal line, 97 yards, 15 plays. They just marched down the field on you. Moments like that are what fans are screaming about during the game, and what I think this team will be kicking itself about at the end of the year.
Is this Matt Patricia though? Is this just who he is?
That's who he is. Yeah.
He doesn't believe teams can sustain drives
Absolutely.
statistically, and let's let them screw up. We're not going to screw up and overcommit to something. We're not going to blitz unnecessarily. But it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, I think, in some ways. When you do that, hey, we're going to give up yards and yards and yards. Okay, we settle for a field goal. Yards and yards and yards. Well, guess what? That's when you end up giving up 500 yards. And when you can't get that stop and you give up a touchdown, or when you're doing that, you find yourself in close games at the end of games where you shouldn't be in close games. So that's definitely his philosophy. It's worked in New England. It worked for him in New England. And maybe, if you have a little bit better of a pass rusher, you have somebody that can get after the quarterback a little bit more, we don't see those yards piling up. Or if you can stop the run. That's what they did so good in the second half of last year, and that's what they have not been able to do. And talking to guys in the locker room today, everyone pointed at the run game, because that unleashed the play-action passing game, and that's why the Vikings were so effective. Yeah, and that's the thing that, when the Lions were really good in 2014, right? It was that defensive line, that led everything, the dominance, the Sioux, and all that stuff, it was, to me, the Patriots are a rare team that they can be this, amorphous thing that changes all the time, and that's Belichick's genius, is adjusting the game plan to whatever he's facing that week, and it's rare. Most teams need an identity. You got to either strap the run, or you have to have the the Legion of Doom in the back, and there's got to be something.
You have to have some great players,
right?
Great,
be great in something. Be great in something, and to me, just being kind of okay at everything is tough. And we, like you said, we saw last year, the run defense. They stopped the run. That set up everything for them.
I think you can win that way in the NFL when you're good at a lot of things, but not great. But I don't know that you can win big enough, when you're doing that. You're always sort of leaving something. When we finished last season, Bob Quinn at his end of season press conference, he talked about needing some playmakers, some of those blue chip players. And I think we all sort of said the same thing, right? You need to get more playmakers. Well, as we look at this team now, what are they still lacking? Playmakers. I mean, talking
spend a lot of money to get them.
Yeah. But there's not a big 15 sack a year guy on this roster. There's Darius Slay obviously has played well. Didn't have a great game before he got injured tonight. As you said, the hamstring might have been an issue. But I don't know that we have an 8 interception guy either. I mean, Slay was that a few years back, but they're just, to me, I don't know. I know this is reactionary. We're coming off a 3rd straight loss, but I think that's the failing of the roster right now, is that there's just not that type of guy that's going to go out and win a ball game for you like that. Maybe Matthew Stafford is it. Maybe they need to put it on their quarterback. He's played really well this year. But defensively, Marvin Jones had a great game tonight, 4 touchdowns. But defensively, they haven't got that this year, and I think that's been a disappointment because so many people, us included, thought they were going to be a pretty good defense.
Yeah, my big question coming in was, what were they going to get from Trey Flowers? How was he going to affect the whole defense? Where if they were going to have to commit more people to stopping him, or if they're going to move him around the defense, I haven't seen him do that much. He just seems to be lining up on the edge, sometimes inside, but not getting a heck of a lot of push, not really commanding double teams.
But I think that's how New England used him too. I mean, he had 7.5 sacks last year. You know, I think he's got 1 now, and so he flashes with a couple plays a game.
For $18 million,
right?
To flash a couple times a game.
That's where I think the disconnect is with us, with Lions fans, and with what the Lions did. I like Trey Flowers as a player. I think he does some really good things for him, and we've seen some flashes this year. But at that type of money, you expect more. It just naturally comes with it. So, but just to sort of spin this forward, because as I'm talking about this in my head, right? I've never really come off that I think they're a 500-ish type team this year, maybe a hair above. I don't know that my opinion on this team changes much after what I saw today. Like, I still think we've seen some progress from this team this year, from the program, I guess, this year. They're pointing in the right direction, even though they've lost 3 straight. And so I still think we're at the end of this year, who knows, but I think we still look at it as, well, they took a little step forward. Maybe they don't get to the promised land, but I can still see flashes of that because the offense played so well today, because we've seen some things out of this team the first 6 weeks. You buy that, or do you think this is a big step back for this team heading into the final 10 games?
Well, we have to see how the defense finishes, but with the money and the resources they committed, the draft picks, the free agency, the defense had to be at least pretty good, at least okay, hovering somewhere around top 10. And if it's not going to be that, you have to really question, going forward, and this is what Patricia is, he's a defensive guru, and he's working with Paul Pasqualoni and all this stuff, and yet it's Darrell Bevel, off the witness protection program coming in and suddenly like, oh, the offense is much better now, which is what they should have done last year with Cooter. So yeah, it's kind of weird, isn't it? Almost by like, well, Cooter failed out of his job, so otherwise he would have kept it, but actually it's Bevel who's getting things going. And we'll see what happens with Kerryon Johnson.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, now they got a big, that's going to hang over them this next week, next couple weeks maybe. Kerryon Johnson had a brace on his right knee as he stood on the sideline. Last year was his left knee, sprained left knee that cost him 6 games at the end of the season. If he misses an extended period of time now, you're without your running game. This is before the trade deadline, so maybe the Lions address it. Kenyon Drake from Miami could be out there, but without Kerryon, I don't know that this offense is complete enough. That play action game that we saw work for the Lions too, or we've seen work for the Lions at times, maybe it just doesn't have as much bite without Kerryon Johnson back there.
Yeah, he's that complete back that they need, and they tried to fashion something with McKissick and Ty Johnson, but it just wasn't the same, going forward.
Serviceable.
Yeah. And I talked to, talking to McKissick in the locker room afterward, he said, well, we got a whole week. If we're not going to have Kerryon, we have a whole week to figure something out. And that does help a little bit. But it's going to be, and it's the run game. It's both the defense and the offensive run game that are going to set the tone for this team. So we'll see. I thought Snacks was going to the graveyard. The way he was laying down, like, this is over. He could barely get up. And suddenly he pops up in they must have done some Mr. Miyagi stuff in halftime and gotten him back out there.
We'll see if he makes it to next week. Saquon Barkley could be there for the Giants, so they could need him more than ever. The way this run defense is performed this year,
Saquon comes in.
They're going to need all comers on that defensive line. Maybe Deshaun Hand finally gets back as well.
Maybe 12 guys on the field with that.
It would help if the officials don't spot it, but look, it's been a long 6 days, I think, for the Lions. They lose that one in Green Bay that a lot of people think they should have won. Lose this one here, fall to 0-2 in the division, all of a sudden 2-3-1, and the Packers are 6-1 right now. They look like they could run away with this. The Vikings are 5-2, so you got a lot of ground to make up in front of you now.
Let me ask you a question. I wasn't in Green Bay, but you were in Green Bay. You're here. Which was more of a dispiriting loss, do you feel, from the players and from the fans, maybe?
I think this one, because I think everyone came away from Green Bay thinking we would have won if not for the officials. Even if Matt Patricia didn't say that and Matthew Stafford didn't say that, and rightfully so. I don't think they should have said that, but I think that was the general consensus, right? We got screwed out of this. We're a good team. We should have beat them. We're coming off. We just played the Chiefs well. You're still puffing your chest up, and then today you go out and you get steamrolled for 500 yards. So it's a tough pill to swallow at home against, I think a mediocre quarterback, even though Cousins played really well today, but no pressure on him. The Lions couldn't do anything right defensively. That's why they lost 42-30.
And this is the kind of game you have to be a little bit worried about from the spirit of the team. And I didn't get the sense of this in the locker room at all, but as Kerryon said last week when we were talking a week or two ago, he said nobody likes to get the ball run down their throats. It really kind of breaks the spirit of the defense and kind of the team when you just get handled. There's nothing you can do, and that's how they looked out here. Was it 148 yards or something like that?
by Cook himself,
by
170 total, yeah.
100. I mean, you can stop him, and that's just the worst feeling. Like,
Absolutely
what's
right.
the point? We're out here, we're getting
You
run
finally
over.
made a good point.
Finally. How many years has it been?
It's been way too
Long
many to count.
time.
I'm not good at math. But no, you're right, because when you hang your head on defense, and defense is, it's a manly game, right? Like, I can stop you, right? I'm going to take the best that you do, and I'm going to shut it down. And when you don't do that, and you don't do that repeatedly, and you keep getting punched in the mouth, it's deflating. It's sort of, well, you get your card taken from you in some ways. And that's happened to the Lions in at least today against the Minnesota Vikings. It did. They had no answers for that Vikings defense.
And we saw at the end it got a little chippy too in the victory formation for the Vikings.
Patricia was not happy about that. He was not happy about A'Shawn Robinson's reaction. A'Shawn got a penalty, came off the field. Patricia looked like he was yelling at him for a minute. A'Shawn kind of didn't want to hear it, sort of walked away. Patricia threw his headset. Game ends. So they got a lot to clean up. They need to get healthy, because the carry-on injury, the Derek Slay injury, those could linger. We'll see about that, but we've got a week to cover all that, and then we will see you back here, Ford Field, next week against the New York Giants. Until then, for Carlos Monarrez, I'm Dave Birkett.